It had natural light that illuminated the inside, but I shined my light around the inside just to make sure. My flashlight hadn't left my pocket lately. I was hoping for a new one soon that could be USB charged or something, but we'll see. It wasn't like the specialized batteries were coming back anytime soon. I didn't expect any bad guys to be in here, but I was used to checking anyway. Bad experience as a kid with nails and used drug needles laying around my play areas. Broken bottles and used condoms were also pretty regular. Stupid things like viruses and puncture wounds were a death sentence now. I was hoping these kids would never have to deal with that stuff ever again like we had to growing up. I checked the multiple rooms. Nothing shiny reflected back at me. No snakes or anything weird like that either. Would hate for them to freak out over a garden snake. Poor things would freak out at the sight of people. So therefore it was safe for the day. I came back out and they all looked determined and ready. All right, y'all have your positions chosen? They all nodded, fiercely determined and grinning. I stepped back. All right, let's see what y'all got then. They trotted over to the door, several on each side. The boy who took lead waved his hand until everyone was watching. As soon as everyone was, he pointed at two and pointed at his eyes. Then he pointed to the right. They nodded back and gave the thumbs up. He pointed at two more, pointed to his eyes, then pointed to the left. They nodded and gave their thumbs up. He pointed at two more and pointed up to the second floor. Then he pushed his hand palm down and made a fist. He thought for a second, then did knife hand chops forward and back. They both nodded and gave thumbs up. He looked at everyone that hadn't got instructions and pointed half to his side of the door and half to the other. Then he made a fist. They all nodded. He moved his hand behind him and pushed his palm forward towards everyone. They all nodded, including Shy Girl, and away everyone went to where they were supposed to go. The lead got behind Little Miss Bold, who still had my shield. Apparently she was going to be lead entry. He looked behind his shoulder, and the two had slowly got on the roof of their play structure. Everyone was watching him that was part of the entry team. He counted down on his hand where they could see 5, 4, 3, then 2, then 1. He gently tapped on Little Miss Bold's shoulder, and she opened the door. She stood back, and the lead on the other side pretended to throw in a flashbang. Then they all charged in, yelling like little hellions. I think I heard some clears shouted, but it immediately segued into them playing for about a half an hour. We didn't have a set recess duration for them. It was part of being a kid, and we wanted them to enjoy being kids. Recess was done when they were pooped out. Or if the weather got too bad. Some of them wanted to play soccer, so we had a soccer ball. I always enjoyed playing that with them. The rest played all of their invented games on the fort. I talked the guys into making a run on a big box toy store and scored a lot of playground equipment. The video games had all been looted, and a lot of the more common must-have toys. A lot of the bicycles were gone too, now that I think of it. Not really surprising, but I wanted those playground toys. It wasn't easy to carry, but I'd brought back a big bag of outdoor toys. I got some basketballs, volleyballs, footballs, 4 square balls, but my most coveted find was a tetherball. I talked the guys into letting me have a steel pole and setting it into unusable concrete-filled tire, then took some paracord and fastened it to a ring we clamped at the top. The kids absolutely loved tetherball. There was something here for all of them. They started to get pretty tuckered out after about a half hour or so, and it was time to go in. It started to sprinkle anyway. I didn't want them potentially getting chilled and catching colds. That could lead to pneumonia and the whole 9 yards. It wasn't good. Looked like they were right in the middle of playing zombies. They wouldn't be happy, but it was close enough to where they'd be going in. "Attention!" I commanded with my authoritative voice. All 13 of them came and lined up. "Get your stuff and lock it down. Time to go in." I could smell it before I heard it. There was a storm coming. The pressure on my head was getting noticeable also. We probably had 20 minutes. A few of the children groaned, but they complied. They had become well disciplined in short order here, so they did a quick sweep, grabbed their stuff, shut the doors on the base, and got in line. The sprinkling was getting quite noticeable. It was time to get inside. Going to try to get some classwork done now that they were worn out, I started the song. Going to the classroom, going to the classroom. Going to learn stuff, going to learn stuff. You are the best kids, we are the best kids. Couldn't ask for better, couldn't ask for better. Chapter 5, Classroom, late morning. Got them outside the main house pretty much just in time. I shuffled in front of them and got the door open to let them inside, and they quietly went inside. I reminded them all to take their shoes off, and they put them in cubbies we'd made for them. They took slippers out, and I'll put them on quietly. I saw that everyone was ready to go, and we walked in silence to the room that had been dedicated for their studies. I opened the door and let them in. It wasn't chilly in here. They had the heat routed from the stove to pump heat throughout the house. We had a few maps that people had before the collapse up on the walls, along with some semi-motivating posters. Everyone took seats, and I shut the door and scuttled over to open the blinds to let the natural light in. There was a good amount of light from this room most hours of the day because it had windows north and south and had a skylight. It was unanimously agreed upon that we have an American flag in the room, and as soon as everyone got situated, they stood and waited. I started with my right hand on my heart, and they immediately joined in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I turned around and smiled, and they all smiled back, and they all sat down. All right, I said with all eyes on me. Who did their homework? They all responded in goofy tones. Okay, I'm just testing you. That was one of the rules, 0 homework. If you couldn't get it done in the time you had, it was your fault, not the kiddos. What'd y'all want to learn today? What'd you cover yesterday? I only had them a day or two a week, so we pretty much trusted them to steer us unless the subject was getting noticeably neglected. They all sort of looked at each other like they were getting a little confused. They explained that they were actually ahead of schedule. I looked over at the library for them, and everything was in order. They said they were up to speed. I thought to myself. I looked for the notes of what was next on the agenda, but I could find none. I looked around more and thought, there were already colorings up all over the wall. They'd been coloring already. With that, there was some thunder relatively close by. One of the girls shrieked, and several people hunched down in their chairs. No worries, everything's fine, it's just thunder. A second later, there was lightning. See, lightning, everything's fine. Now, I see you've been coloring already. Was there anything you've been inspired to work on? It started raining fairly heavily. I imagined the light going out and being so thankful that there wasn't power to worry about anymore. That'd frighten the kids even worse if it was still a thing. I remember multiple times losing power in the middle of the day. Very few rooms had natural light. It understandably messed up the day's worth of studies. It wasn't even a blip anymore. So how about story time? Someone asked. Then about 5 more story times got repeated. Story time, I asked. Is everyone cool with that? They all nodded. I got out some blankets from the chest in the corner and handed them to one of the children to hand out. I got water bottles from another chest and handed those out to another kid to hang out. Water and blankets were being handed out, so I went back to my spot in the front. What kind of story about what? I asked. The rain being wonderful white noise and the air starting to smell amazing. One of the kids said, "Storm!" Then 3 or 4 storms resonated throughout the class. So, you want to hear about a storm? They nodded, and I thought for a second. All right, I'll tell you about the biggest storm of all. It wasn't a windstorm or a snowstorm. It was a storm just like you're seeing right now, except north of here, and they weren't prepared like we are. I could see all the little chitlins settling in. Here we go, I thought. The story of Knuckles, Malaise, and Luxon, Seattle, day before collapse. Winter. Chapter 6, Knuckles' intro, morning. It started on a normal enough morning, sort of like today. Safety was getting progressively worse in the city-states. But not everyone was ignoring the issue. A guy we'll just call Knuckles was in town, trying to find a cheap version of productivity software. He was completely mentally immune to society's decline. In his head, it was completely a normal day. He had kissed his wife, new baby, and dogs goodbye and headed into town. It was his first day off in ages, and he was laser-focused on getting this new software. He wanted a version of the software that didn't expire and didn't have subscription fees forever. Buying the software online was super expensive, but he'd found a place that had the suite and the code for the right price. This version would be significantly less expensive in every way, well worth the drive. It was a legit OEM version that some mom-and-pop computer hole in the wall had on a back shelf that nobody paid attention to. And the shop didn't open yet, so he decided to sit down for breakfast. He was trying to get in and out early before the traffic got too bad.